Planet Reddit. Today's story is...
My stepson tried to sabotage my truck while my wife laughed at this simple truck driver on the phone. What they never imagined was my 6-month plan. Well, Reddit, after spending the last 3 hours reading stories about abused stepfathers, I thought that maybe sharing my experience could help another poor guy avoid going through the same thing I did. Warning, this will be long and probably have typos, because I'm exhausted writing from my phone inside my truck. I'm 41 years old, man, and I've been driving trucks since I was 23. I started with nothing but a commercial driver's license and a dream of one day owning my own truck. I worked hard, lived in that truck and saved every penny until I could afford a Peterbilt. I was doing pretty well, in fact. I had my own route, regular customers, and I even started to accumulate decent savings. I had no wife, no children, just me and my dog, living our life on the road. I wasn't exactly rolling in money, but I had everything under control. My truck was completely paid for, I had a small apartment that I hardly used and enough extra money to treat myself from time to time. Not bad for someone who grew up in a trailer park with nothing. First, you need to understand how this whole mess started. It was 2015 and I was in a pet shop buying food for my German Shepherd, Ghost. Ghost was this magnificent dog I had rescued a year earlier. The best decision I made, but practically the only good decision in this whole story. I was there comparing prices of dog food when a child literally crashed into my legs at full speed. Seriously, this kid was running as if he were being chased. Ghost started wagging his tail frantically. This child, who I later learned was called Liam, was about 7 or 8 years old. Behind him came a woman, looking completely exhausted, holding the hand of a little girl. That was Mia and little Amy. Mia looked like one of those mothers you see in the movies, trying to keep everything under control but one step away from losing her composure. I helped Liam up. The boy was still laughing because Ghost was giving him the sloppiest kisses in the universe and Mia started apologizing repeatedly. "Sorry, he's very active today," she said. Liam apologized too, but I just laughed, because honestly it was the most exciting thing that had happened to me all week. Being a truck driver means spending many hours alone on the road, so little accidents with children are a nice change of routine. It turns out they were there because Liam was begging his mom for a pet snake. No joke. We got to talking, you know how it goes, making small talk while a hyperactive kid tries to convince your dog to be his new best friend. That's when I noticed the Marine Corps widow's pin on her bag. At first I didn't mention anything, but it certainly explained a lot. I later found out that her husband had died in Afghanistan a year ago. A real hero, bronze medal, the whole deal. He left behind an 8-year-old boy who barely remembered him and a 4-year-old girl who would remember him even less. Now, I'm not going to pretend that I didn't notice that Mia was attractive. She was. But that wasn't what captivated me. It was seeing her try so hard to keep everything under control, like when Liam asked if the snake could sleep in Dad's old room, and her voice cracked slightly when she said no. Ghost picked up on everything. Honestly, this dog, who normally takes forever to warm up to people, let Liam climb all over him like it was a game. Even little Amy laughed every time Ghost gently licked her hand. Mia told me it was the first time she'd seen Amy smile at a stranger in months. I did something impulsive then. I offered to walk Ghost around the shop with them while we looked at the pets they definitely wouldn't be taking home. Mia was firm on the no snakes rule, and honestly, it was a sensible decision. Liam was delighted, holding Ghost's leash with me, and Mia really relaxed a bit. We ended up exchanging numbers to organize dog play dates. She mentioned it half-jokingly, as they didn't have one, but I think we both knew what was happening. Looking back now, sitting in my truck with Ghost's gray muzzle on my lap, I wonder if he knew from the beginning. That dog was always smarter than me. He loved those kids right away, but every time Mia came near, he'd get that look, not growling, nothing aggressive. Just observant. I should have paid more attention to that. I guess not even your dog can protect you from your own bad decisions, although he tried. Anyway, those first few months after meeting Mia were, well, I can't even describe them properly. It started with those dog play dates we'd mentioned. I would take Ghost to this little park near his apartment complex, and Liam would literally tremble with excitement every time he saw us arrive in my truck. The boy was fascinated by that truck, by the way. He thought it was the most amazing thing in the world that I would drive a monster truck. It's just a regular Peterbilt, but try explaining that to an 8-year-old. This was where I made my first mistake. I started adjusting my routes to spend more time at home. Any trucker reading this knows that's basically throwing money away, but there I was, turning down good long-distance jobs to take local routes, just to be there for things like Liam's games and Amy's doctor's appointments. Mia was having financial difficulties. She never asked for help directly, but it was obvious. The apartment was always freezing in winter because she skimped on heating. The children wore clothes that were a bit small on them. Once I noticed that Liam's shoes were literally taped together. So, yes, I got involved. What else could I do? I bought Liam new shoes. The boy cried when I gave him some with lights. It broke my heart. I started bringing extra food, that kind of thing. Mia tried to refuse it at first, but you try saying no and your son is jumping for joy with his first new shoes in years. The relationship became serious pretty quickly after that. I started to stay longer and longer. Ghost loved it. The dog had 2 children to play with and more space to move around. I would come back from short trips and there they all would be waiting for me. Even Amy began to grow fond of me. She stopped crying every time I came to ask her for a bedtime story. The first time Liam called me Dad, I was under my truck doing maintenance. The boy watched me work, reaching for tools, the wrong ones usually, but hey, at least he was trying. I dropped a spanner on my finger and swore. He laughed and said, "Dad, you swore? Just like that?" As if he'd been calling me that forever. That weekend I went out and bought one of those mugs that says "World's Greatest Dad." Mia and I got married about a year after we met. Nothing extravagant, a ceremony at the courthouse because I had a delivery that afternoon. She didn't want anything big anyway. She said her first marriage had been enough. We found a bigger place, a nice house with a garden for Ghost and the kids. I started a college fund for both kids, separate accounts in my name, thank God. I worked tirelessly to provide them with everything they needed and most of what they wanted. You know what's funny? Other truckers used to tease me for missing out on the good routes, rushing home for dance recitals, and meetings with teachers. But I was proud of that. Proud that Amy would video call me to show me her art projects. Proud that Liam wanted me to teach him about engines. Proud when other parents at school events commented on what a good father he was. Ghost was also living his best life. He had his own spot on the sofa, which Mia hated but tolerated. He followed the children everywhere. He even had play dates with the neighbors' dogs. But he never quite got along with Mia. He didn't accept her caresses, he didn't snuggle up to her like he did with the children. I also began to notice little details about Mia. Like how she introduced me as the children's stepfather instead of her husband. How she kept a photograph of her late husband on her bedside table, but didn't put up photos of our wedding. How she talked about her late husband to anyone who would listen, but changed the subject if anyone asked what I did for a living. But anyway, the kids seemed happy. The house was paid for and I thought I had what I considered a family. Ghost had his humans, I had my family and life was good. Now remember how I told you that Liam was that sweet little boy who thought my truck was the most awesome thing in the world? Well, teenagers are a completely different story. When he turned 17, things changed. I came back from a 3-day trip. I had worked hard to get there in time for his soccer game, even turning down a better paid route to be there. I walked in the door, Ghost ran to greet me, as always, and I heard Liam talking to his friends in the kitchen. No, my real dad was a Marine with a Bronze Star and everything. This guy is just my mom's husband, but it got worse. Amy, who was already 13, started to imitate everything her brother did. Once I asked him to clean up his mess in the kitchen. It was like I'd asked him to donate a vital organ. Why should I? You're not my real dad. There it was. I started to hear it constantly. Every time I tried to set some rule or limit, you're not my real dad. Every time I tried to help with homework or give advice, you're not my real dad. I began to feel that this was her new favorite phrase, and Mia just tuned out. Always on her phone, always too busy to intervene. Once, I even heard her on the phone with her friend, laughing that the kids were going through a phase and that they obviously missed their real dad. Real dad? They don't even remember him, as if I hadn't been there for everything for the past 9 years. Worst of all, I began to notice how Mia talked about me with her friends. Oh, I was on the road a lot, always said with an apologetic tone as if she were ashamed. Meanwhile, she talked about James, her late husband, as if she'd missed the moon. James was a war hero and James would have wanted this and that. They even affected the relationship with Ghost. Before, he used to sleep in the children's room. Sometimes they would argue over who would have him that night. Now they would put him away, saying that their friends were coming and they didn't want dog hair everywhere. The only time they paid attention to Ghost was when they needed something from me. It's amazing how they would suddenly become dog lovers when they wanted money or favors. But then I started to find out about all those family activities to which I wasn't invited, Mia's family gatherings, school events, even simple dinners out. They would wait until I was away on a trip, then they would have family activities without me. I would see the photos on Mia's Facebook afterwards. One night, I confronted Mia about it. She just looked at me with pity, as if I were some poor truck driver who didn't understand how things worked. They're teenagers. They need space and you're away so much anyway. Yes, away. Working hard to pay for everything, their phones, Mia's car, the things my children needed. But apparently my truck was no longer good enough for them to see. Away, working extra routes to afford the lifestyle they had become accustomed to. It was like watching something deteriorate from the inside. On the surface, everything seemed perfect, a nice house, fancy cars, the kids in good schools. But underneath, everything was falling apart. Ghost sensed it. He'd started doing this thing where he'd put his head in my lap whenever I was at home, staring at me with those wise doggy eyes, as if trying to communicate something. But I wasn't ready to listen yet. But then things went from bad to worse. Like my tools disappearing from the garage. They weren't anywhere else, they just disappeared. Liam used to help me maintain my truck. He knew exactly which tools I needed the most. It's funny how those were always the ones that went missing, and my truck started having problems. Nothing serious at first, a scratch here, a dent there. It could have been anything, right? But then one morning I went out and found the cap to my fuel tank unscrewed. Anyone who knows anything about trucks knows how dangerous that could have been if I hadn't noticed, so I installed a security camera in the yard after that. Guess what I saw on the footage? Our dear boy, Liam, at 2 in the morning messing with my truck. When I showed the video to Mia, you know what she said to me? Well, maybe if you were home more, he wouldn't behave like that. Yeah, that's when I started keeping receipts for everything. Every repair, every tool replaced, everything I paid for. My lawyer says that turned out to be the smartest thing I could have done. But this is where it really went wrong. One night, I was at home between routes and I heard Amy and Mia talking in the kitchen. Amy was talking about how a friend's family had had a big Christmas party, a supposedly elegant event. Mom, what should I tell them about Dad? My ears pricked up, thinking maybe she was talking about me. Just tell them what I always say, honey, that your father was a Marine who died serving his country. They didn't even lower their voices. They didn't care if I heard. I was sitting right there in the living room with Ghost and they acted like I didn't exist. Ghost growled. The first time I heard him growl was at the family. Mia jumped, tried to cover it up with a laugh. Oh, that dog is getting so grumpy in his old age. No, Mia, Ghost just stopped pretending, just like me. But the last straw was when I found out that they had had a whole Thanksgiving dinner while I was on a route. Not just them, all of Mia's family, some of the children's friends, even some neighbors. I saw the photos on Facebook. They set up in my garden, used my barbecue, which I hadn't been allowed to use for months because the smoke affected Amy's allergies, and acted like one big happy family. And the caption under the photo read, "So grateful for family, missing James more than ever today." I was out there driving through a snowstorm to deliver emergency supplies, missing my family. And they were playing at being a family, pretending I didn't exist. I'd had enough that night. I slept in my truck with Ghost. I didn't even bother going inside. When I finally went into the house, I started making plans. I called my friend Rich, who's a lawyer. I started gathering documents, I took screenshots of everything. But I wasn't ready to take the next step yet. I still thought maybe there was something worth saving. How naive I was, but you know what's funny about life? Just when you think things can't get any more complicated, the universe finds a way to prove you wrong. That day started out normally. Just finishing a long trip from California, wanting to surprise Amy for her 14th birthday. I didn't know that I would be the one receiving a surprise. I was trying hard because Amy's birthday was approaching, and although the situation was tense, I still wanted to be there. I had it all planned out. I was going to surprise her. I had a bracelet that I had been saving up for months to buy her. I got home early for once. It was about 6 in the evening. The sun was still shining. I saw all these cars parked around our house. Ghost started behaving strangely the moment we arrived. He's usually excited about coming home, but this time he was tense. I went around the back because that's where all the noise was coming from. And there I found a party in full swing in my garden. Catering, whatever. And right in the middle of it all was Amy. Just as Mia was telling a guest that her late husband would be proud of her, that it would be very sad when it was her turn to get married because she wouldn't have her father to accompany her. But at least her uncle, Mia's brother, could do it, since he was her late husband's best friend. Yes, the same brother who had done nothing for Amy in his entire life, only turning up drunk at Christmas parties and telling war stories. I must have made some noise because Ghost let out a soft whine. That's when they finally noticed I was standing there. The expression on Amy's face was not one of shame or guilt, just annoyance. As if I had ruined their perfect moment simply by existing. Mia tried to hide it, but I wasn't listening anymore. I was contemplating my house, my garden, the party that was financed with my money. I learned later that Mia had used my credit card for the catering. Ghost was glued to my leg, making the gesture where he tries to protect me, but I also think he was trying to comfort me simultaneously. So I turned around and left. I got in my truck, Ghost jumped in and we drove off. We spent the night at a gas station about 50 miles away, just sitting there with Ghost. Both of us staring into space. That night, I called Rich, my lawyer friend, and told him it was time. He simply replied, "Finally, I've had the documents ready for a long time." Honestly, after that birthday party, I didn't have the strength to fight anymore. I spent the whole night in my truck with Ghost looking at old photos on my phone, pictures of Liam's first baseball game, Amy's dance recital, all those family moments I thought we had. But here's something most people don't understand about the trucking business: it's not just a guy driving a big rig down the road. It's a business with contracts, accounts, assets, everything. And while Mia and the kids were busy looking down their noses at the simple trucker, I was running that business like a real CEO. This house they lived in my name. The cars they used, in my name. The credit cards Mia used to pay for that fancy birthday party, all in my name. Even the utilities were registered under my company's name because of a tax arrangement Rich had set up years ago, but I kept calm. I kept driving my routes, I kept paying the bills, I kept acting as if nothing was wrong. I even sat down to dinner one night while Mia and Liam talked about colleges that cost more than my first truck a year. I nodded, playing the fool they thought I was. Meanwhile, Rich and I were going through everything: bank statements, property deeds, credit card bills, everything. We also discovered some interesting things, like Mia had been writing checks to her brother, the surrogate dad, from my business account. Or how Liam had been using my credit card to buy stuff without my authorization. Best of all, Mia never signed a prenuptial agreement, but she didn't put her name to anything important either. She thought that keeping her maiden name meant she retained her independence or something. In reality, it meant she had no legal rights to my assets. Rich laughed out loud when he realized that. You know what really bothers me? While all this was going on, they kept acting like I was the villain. Liam was still tampering with my truck. I caught him on camera again, trying to put sugar in the fuel tank this time. One night, I was sitting in my office, doing paperwork, when I heard Mia say to someone on the phone, "Well, he's just a truck driver. He won't notice if a few thousand go missing." Ghost, who had basically moved into my study with me at this point, looked at me as if to say, "It's now or never, Dad." I just patted him on the head and continued working on the paperwork. What they didn't know was that I had been moving money around for months. Legally, all within the law. Rich made sure of that. But strategically opening new accounts, redirecting business income, canceling credit cards and creating new ones that they didn't know about. I even started a new limited liability company for my growing fleet. On the day everything was ready, I went out for a long walk with Ghost. Everything was now in place and I was about to walk away with all my money and my business. That night, I made one last call: "Rich, do it." The plan we had been working on for months was finally in motion, and let me tell you something about patience. Have you ever seen one of those nature documentaries where a predator waits patiently, letting its prey think that everything is fine until the perfect moment to strike? That was me. That Tuesday morning, I told Mia I was going away on a 3-day route. She probably thought I was being a good trucker, earning more money for the family. Heck, Liam was probably already planning which part of my truck to damage next, but little did they know that I would be parked just an hour away at my friend's place, watching everything unfold through the security cameras I had installed. And it was better than watching a movie at the cinema. Rich took care of orchestrating this spectacle. The courier arrived just as Mia was having her morning coffee, or several coffees in fact. 3 thick envelopes, each one with a different category of consequences. You should have seen her face when she opened the first package, the divorce papers. But not just any divorce paperwork. We're talking a real file with security footage of Liam's vandalism, bank statements showing how Mia treated my business account as her personal piggy bank, and all of Amy's expenses, like her birthday party. Then came the eviction notice. Mia was always so proud of maintaining her independence, not taking my surname, but she never bothered to check whether her name appeared on the title deeds to the house. Funny how it all turns out, but the cherry on the cake was that 3rd envelope. Seeing her expression when she realized that all the credit cards had been canceled, all the joint accounts closed, all the assets transferred, everything perfectly legal, everything documented, everything gone. Like watching someone realize they've been playing poker with marked cards, and they've just lost everything. The collapse was epic. First came the calls from Mia, screaming about the money, the house, and how she couldn't do this to them. Then Liam, as if he had any right after what he did with my truck. Finally, Amy, because part of her lifestyle was financed by her mother's money. Not a word about the years I spent being her father, not an apology in sight. Then Mia's brother showed up, probably thinking he was going to play the bully. Yeah, he didn't look so brave when my lawyer's associate handed him a cease and desist order along with a restraining order. Turns out threatening someone who keeps receipts isn't a very smart strategy. By sunset, Mia was crying to anyone who would listen, playing the victim on social media, and Liam was still making threats about my truck. Thanks for the written evidence, genius. But here's the best bit. I made sure everyone knew why. Over the next few days, I received hundreds of messages, threats, pleas, attempts at emotional manipulation, you name it. I didn't reply to a single one. I stayed in my truck with Ghost, watching karma do its thing through my phone screen. I stopped by the house a week later, saw moving trucks in the driveway. I guess reality is hard when it finally catches up with you. Update. When I made my original post, I had no intention of doing an update. I didn't share my story in real time, I only told it once it was all over. But I've been asked for an update, so I'll try to tell you a few things that have happened in the last few months to complete the story. To begin with, the most important thing I have, which is Ghost. Everyone asks how old he is, so I'll tell you he's 11, almost 12. That's according to my calculations, because when I adopted him nobody knew exactly how old he was, but it was estimated that he was already 1 or 2 years old. He's an old dog, but he's my ghost, so he still accompanies me on my routes. He always lies down, and when we make a stop, I help him down, as he's not as agile as he used to be. Even so, he still chases after any animal he finds out there, although he no longer tries to catch it. I've gone back to my longer routes, but only because I enjoy making those long trips with just Ghost, some good music and miles ahead of me. I have some trucks that are driven by employees, so I could retire, maybe adopt a slower pace. But there's not much to do if I stay at home, maybe think about everything that's happened to me, and that's not what I want. However, my therapy is driving, and I don't think anything can replace it. Well, maybe a long walk with Ghost. As for what I thought was my family, I haven't spoken to them in all this time. I don't think they want to communicate with me either. I didn't mean anything to them, but after my response, I think they care even less about me now. It doesn't affect me, I don't want to have any relationship with people like them. I just know they've had to move out and their life is more or less back to the way it was before. Mia never bothered to look for a better job when she was living comfortably at my expense, so now she has to work hard again to pay the bills and the rent. Liam, on the other hand, has got into trouble because his behavioral problems have worsened. I know Mia has had to pick him up from the police station on more than one occasion. Maybe it's my fault because I didn't discipline him properly. But since I wasn't their father, according to them, I did a good job by not being a good father. And I don't know much about Amy, but I guess she can no longer boast of a life with certain luxuries, like the ones I provided her with. Which, although they weren't extraordinary, are better than her current situation. It was easy for her to brag about her heroic father while she was spending my money. The most ironic thing about all this is that I was never jealous of Mia's late husband. Sometimes I think that a man who served this country surely had integrity, so he would be very disappointed in his family. I think that in another life and in different circumstances, we could have been good friends. And I even think that Ghost would have wagged his tail enthusiastically,